record and we'll see how that goes. All right, we're waiting for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're waiting for 2 people, yes? Everybody exchanging? I think that comes to one. Oh, there we go. You got your little cheat behind?
These?
Yes?
Oh, whoa, what?
Yeah, you're white. Your cheat is white. It's going very well, don't you think?
Feel better about it.
Okay. So how is everybody? So this is day 4, yes? And you're all here now? Yeah, we're all here. Awesome. So I'm going to close this door since we're going to be clapping today. So tell me, so how was master class? You've all had master class now? Yes?
So fun.
So fun? Good, and you know what you're going to do? You don't feel overwhelmed by any of the stuff they throw at you? Good, have your mentors been behaving and been like available for questions and reaching out to you?
Yeah.
So? All right, well, reach out to them if they don't. And if somebody else is a really good mentor, then say, I got some questions, okay? Because that's what they're there for. It's just to be available to you and help you. And I know some master classes actually will give you a mentor as well.
Yeah.
Michael might do that maybe?
Yeah.
Jody does that as well? Okay. All right, well, the very first thing we have to do, which is the thing I can never do, is I've got to take attendance and figure out if I remember anybody's names, which I'm telling you, it's hard for me when I can see all your faces. So it's even harder when I only have your eyeballs. So let's see here. Okay, we're starting with Madison from Texas. And yeah, oh, no, you're just perfect. I'm just going to tell you. Madison from Texas. Now, is your family experiencing any of that stuff that's coming right now?
No.
That's in Houston, right?
What?
The hurricane.
And is Houston where you're from?
There's a hurricane, but it didn't hit Houston. It's like hitting Louisiana.
It's a Louisiana.
Oh, yeah, that's what they actually.
It's a bad one. I mean, they said it's bigger than, it's big.
They like took off from school, but nothing happened. It's been like sunny outside.
It's always funny when we're tornadoes.
It is, isn't it? I was thinking that's what we have to deal with here, but tornadoes they're horrible if they get you right where, you know, but a hurricane, I mean, that can be a statewide. It's like a state's worth of stuff coming at you. It's hard. Okay, Sarah from Louisville, I know you, yes? Okay. I knew you were there. If you can stay in the same spots, that would be awesome. That'd be the worst if halfway through you say, let's just shake things up a bit. It's going to get a lot easier for me once we get the poker chips, because then we'll know exactly, right? Annika, I think Annika's over here too, yes? No? Oh, okay. And I was right about Annika.
Yes.
Okay. Annika from Seattle. Anthony, yes. Anthony? From Cincinnati, that's right. Oh, you have a nice suit there. Maya. Didn't somebody in Michael's master class have like blonde hair that was like, that I swore I did not see in Signt Singing? Maybe, oh.
Olivia or Abigail?
They're not in Michael's.
I've never seen that person in Signt Singing. So Maya, all right, so we were talking the whole time. Maya from California, from Sacramento, from Los Angeles. Maddie. I'm going to guess you. Adeline? Oh, come on, Jay. I mean, might as well be okay. Liana? Yes? Okay. Jada? Oh, Indianapolis, yes? Yes, Jada. Braden? Joel. No, it must be good, yes? And you're Texas, this is what, you're Houston?
Yes.
Okay. And last but not least, Mitchell, who loves theater, is right in front. Okay, let me just try this again real quick. So, we have Madison in the back here. Sarah, yes. Annika, yes?
Yes.
Anthony, okay. Maya and Adeline, this is just a stupid, Adeline, yes? No, Texas. What number did, no, it's not. All right, no, Adeline. Yeah, you know what, I'm not even gonna play this game anymore. This is ridiculous. So we're gonna do poker chips and then I'll have a better understanding of what it is. And I apologize, I'm just terrible. I guess I should have been looking at photos or something, but that would have been creepy too if I had your pictures laid out, in my office with bits of string that some sort of weird connection I was making.
What?
Okay. So, practice rooms. Did we learn anything about practice rooms, about where they are, how to find them?
Yes.
What did we learn?
If you take a picture, I went to Sursa, but it works both with Sursa and NVU. If you take a picture of the QR code and it goes to the website and you don't have a login, you have to email a certain email, and then be like, hey, can I have an account? And they'll be like, all right, what major are you? Are you connected to us? I'm like, oh, musical theater. And they're like, oh, we love musical theater kids. Here's your account.
Good, yeah, they better accept us.
Yeah, and so they give you an account and then you put it in, you change the password, and then you have your login. And
Right.
then you can figure it out.
Okay, so let's try to figure out that by this weekend, we can figure this out, right?
The
At
email is
least
just,
so.
yeah, sorry, the email is just music@bsu.edu.
They should email you.
So then next week, because that's going to be so important, and we need access to those practice rooms. We need to figure out where they are and just be able to go. And I'm not saying, I'm not telling you you've got to live in the practice room, but at least we should at least get that hurdle out of the way so that we're not panicked when we do need one and we don't know what to do. Okay, cool. So how many of you have your books?
It's
Ordered, okay, yes. Okay, so quite a few of you. I made photocopies of kind of the first little bits because I didn't know. But that's great. So if you've got your book, open your book. So we are going to, I told you we weren't going to do any singing today, yes? We're just going to do some clapping. So before we do that, I don't know what Ron has been talking about, but remember how I said we're going to, what Ron and I are going to be doing, it's going to be like the same thing, and we're going to just keep reinforcing to the point where, oh, that turned down, so now I don't have to yell. To the point where you're going to be like, yeah, I've heard this, I get it, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Some of this stuff, hopefully all of it you know, but I'm just going to pretend like we don't know it, because who knows. What I love about what many of you are learning in terms of music theory, sight singing, piano, is that what I love about music is that there's a language that someone or a bunch of people came up with years and years ago, where they actually wrote it down. They said, let's figure out a system so that if I come up with a little song that I like, I could hand it to Jada, and she could look at that and know what those blips on that page mean and reproduce my creation, And before we had that, all we had was, we probably were all sitting around a campfire, or we were in some tiny little village, and we came up with some beautiful little song that we loved, and somebody from another village came by and they listened to that song and said, oh, that's a really lovely little thing. And then that villager took it back to his village and started singing it, and then they got off a little. I don't know if any of you have studied folk music, but it's really cool because there are regionalisms. There are certain things that sound different depending on where you go, even like little melodic twists and turns that they might not have in one part of the country or the state that they do in other parts. And it's real cool, and it's because they learned it by listening and by hearing. And so before we had language, whether it be reading and writing or music, that's how we did it. It was stories, and we passed down those stories. And to me, that's really cool, and that's like a lost art in itself, because sometimes language and written stuff can be kind of impeding in terms of our creativity and how we process. But, and anyway, we've got this wonderful system of music. Okay, yes? So even though we're not talking about notes today, I'm just going to run through this real quick, and I know you all know this, but to come up with music, to figure out how we write something, if I were to come up with some little, chord progression or melody or something, this is where we start. We start with these 5 lines, and this is called a what?
Staff.
A staff, right? And multiple staffs are called staves, yes? Okay? But yeah, this is a staff. There are 5 lines on it, no more. We don't ever have any more. We don't have six lines, we don't have 4 lines. If we're a percussionist where there's no tone to it, like say you're a snare drum player, sometimes it's just 1 line, because we don't need all those 5 lines. But for our purposes, there are always 5 lines. And these lines and spaces are where our notes go. Yes? You know that, right? So a note could go on, oh, this is a terrible pen. A note could go on a line, or it could go on a space. And the only way, and they came up with a wonderful system, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? We don't have to know any other letter in the alphabet other than A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But the only way we can determine which one of these is A, B, C, D, E, F, G is something that we put at the very front of the staff. And it's kind of the thing that says, this is how you'll interpret what those notes mean, right? And it's called a clef. You know that, right? So what is this clef called?
Treble.
A treble clef, right? It's also called a G clef. And this cool little circle doohickey is circling this line, which is G. So you can also remember, it kind of looks like a G a little bit too. So if we know that going up, the notes are A, B, C, D, F, G, right? This is an E, this is an F, this is a G, yes? Another clef, there are many of them, but really the only 2 we're going to make you learn is this one here too. What's that clef called?
Bass.
A bass clef, yes. It's also called an F, as in Frank, clef. And these 2 little dots, if we were to look right in the middle of those dots, that line is an F. Yeah, so that's an F, that's an E, that's a D. There are other clefs too. I can't really draw them very well, but it's kind of, I think it kind of looks like that, but it's like an alto clef. Like if you're a viola player, you often play an alto clef. If you're a cellist, sometimes you'll play in tenor clef. I was a trombonist. I was never good enough to be able to read tenor clef because those are the real high notes. But so this thing can get moved around and used different ways. This is an A. It outlines an A, I think, or does it outline a C? No, it outlines a C. But we don't have to worry about that clef. So these are our 2 clefs. And you know the bottom notes are the lower notes, the upper are the top, yes? So if I were to go up the scale here, E, F, G, this is a C. Do we all know what this is that I just drew? A legend line, yeah. And so we can kind of extend the clef, or extend the staff without drawing more lines. So this is a C. If I've got my F, my E, my D, my C, this and this are the same sounding note on the piano. You know that, right? That's what we call middle C, and that's it. And lo and behold, it sure looks like it's right in the middle of the piano, doesn't it? But depending on how they work, and the reason we've got different clefs is if we just had a treble clef and we wanted to write really low notes, we'd have to write so many ledger lines to be able to accomplish what a bass clef accomplishes for us, you know? And so it just becomes like inefficient. So that's the reason we've got multiple clefs, is just that we want to keep as much stuff on the staff as we can, just because it's easier to read. You're going to find with music, there are multiple ways to write everything. I mean, there are at least 2 ways that you could notate any number of things. And my rule of thought is always, whatever the most straightforward thing is that I could hand to somebody and they could recreate and not stumble over and not have a problem with, that's the way that it should probably be written. Because all it is, it's like a recipe, you know? If you wanted to recreate grandma's zucchini bread, and you've got the little card, but there's like a little blip of butter that's spilled on, you know, like you can't read it, or it never said what the temperature to set the oven was, and you'd never be able to recreate it. So the more clear-cut these kind of roadmaps can be, I think, the more successful we'll be at recreating what the writer wanted, right? Okay, so even though this is all review for all of you, so those are our notes. How we organize time, which is what we're getting to today, is we can draw these little guys here. This is a bar line, yes. and these are measures, right? And a measure is like stuff. It's like an amount of stuff that we can stick in here. And the time signature at the front is what's going to tell us how much stuff we can fit in those measures, yes? So there are all sorts of time signatures. Most of them have two numbers. They're cut time and common time can kind of be written a couple different ways. But there are two numbers. The most common is this, and if we were to put that, we always put that at the very beginning of a piece of music, and anytime we change the time signature, we've got to notate it. Otherwise, we just have to know if we're sitting at the piano that it's 4/4 all the time. It's not every system that we see, you know? But, so what does this mean? There are two numbers. What does the number on the bottom mean? Do we know? Yeah, how many beats go in here? No. This signals how many beats go in. This signals what the beat is. Yes? So 4 means quarter note. Yeah, so now I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so this signals how many beats go in this measure. The bottom number signifies what is a beat. Because it's one thing to say, well, you have 4 beats in a measure, but if I don't know what the beat is, okay? So we're just going to do this silly little thing, is I'm going to write some stuff here, which again, you won't know. This little circle, this beautiful little circle, is called a whole note. And if I were to break this up in 2, we get what? 2 half notes. Yes? If I were to break those up, I get 4 quarter notes. And if I were to keep going, I'd get 8 eighth notes. Okay? The bottom 4 stands for quarter. And if I were to have a 2 under there, that would be a half note. If we had an 8, it would be an eighth note. The eighth note would get the beat. Okay? So in the case of 4/4, it's saying we have 4 beats in a measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. So in these measures, I could fit a whole note, because a whole note is made up of 4 quarters, yes. I could fit 2 half notes. I could fit 2 quarter notes and a half note. I could fit 4 eighth notes and a half note. Okay, you get it? So then there are corresponding rests to these notes, yes? And we know this too. So a whole note, a whole rest, I should say, kind of looks like this, kind of looks like a hat. They always say like it's a hat that you could pull something out of, or like a little hole. It actually just usually sits right here underneath this, 4th line, okay? Goes right underneath. That's like, there would be 4 beats of rest that we don't have to do anything with. It can also just be a signifier for nothing's going on in that measure regardless of what time signature you're in too, so that's a little confusing. A half rest looks like the same thing, but it sits on top of 1 line. Usually the 3rd one. So like a half rest, if I had a measure here, probably goes right here. Okay? The quarter rest is the weirdest of the bunch. Looks like that a little bit. So, and again, if I didn't want to use that half rest, could I use 2 quarter rests? Do they mean the exact same thing? Yes, they sure do. So again, there's another example of that's 2 ways. Now, if we were in 4/4, I'd have to draw a note here, or, to fill the measure. I don't know if any of you have used Finale, but if you go to try to put too many notes in a measure, you hear this boom. I'm like, what is it doing? Boom. And I'm like, oh, I have too many notes in that measure. I can't do that. It won't let me. An 8th rest looks like this, kind of. So, an 8th rest here, and then a string of notes. Okay? Yes? Does that make sense? So in sight singing, how we are going to do this is we're always going to count the beat, okay? So if we have 4 beats in a measure, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, okay? And even if, say, we just had a whole note. And we're always going to clap when we have like a new, so we're going to clap kind of where you would sing. Like if you were to sing, you'd sing here, you'd sing, you know, anytime we have a new note, you're going to clap. But you're always going to count where those beats fall, okay? So we are just going to dive right in here. So if you have your book, turn to page 8. Books.
Just let me know that mine is here.
Oh, good.
Just let them-
That's all right. So here we go. And so what they've done at the very beginning of this book is they have written underneath each of these examples the number system, 1, 2, 3, 4, all that sort of thing, okay? So if the quarter note gets the beat, our 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the quarter notes that we're counting. If we had eighth notes, these are going to be oh, this pen, throw it, that's garbage. If we're going to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, so that we still see where those beats fall, but now we've added the eighth notes in between, okay? So let's try to clap these. Some of these are pretty easy. But again, we're only going to clap anytime we have a new note. But I do want you to count all the beats in between. And again, if we have eighth notes, you do need to count those 2 along when you clap them. Okay, so let's just try this together. I'll just hold it. So let's just do number 1. Well, we always take these nice and slow. I'm never concerned about how fast we do sight singing for the test too. We take it nice and slow. There's no reason to rush any of these, okay? So here we go, example number 1. 1 and 2 and ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome. And you can get as into it and be as goofy as I am here, okay? So let's look at number 2. Number 2, we've got, look at there, we've got some quarter rests. Now what I will say, do you see example number 2, the third measure, how those eighth notes look? And example number 1, the third measure, how those eighth notes look? What I will tell you, and this is just kind of standard practice, but it can be kind of confusing. Normally how they lay out a measures, or like if we're in 4/4, how they like to write eighth notes is, if you had a string of them, is they link beats 1 and 2 together. They beam them together. I think because they think it looks nice and neat, and then they would beam the other ones together, okay? Now, as I said, there are more than one ways to write these. Could I also, what if I just wanted to see where the beat fell? 1 and 2 and, could I write them like this? Yes. Does this mean this? Yes. Could I also do individual flags, you know, and not beam any of them together? Yes. Okay? But when it comes to like how we like read it, I always say the easier we can convey the information, the better. This, I think, through the years, they feel looks a lot neater and easier than this. For years, this is how I wrote music down because I wanted to see where those beats fall. I think it's real easy. It gets a little complicated when they beam them in 2 beats per. So in the example of that measure 2, they have removed these 2 beats with a quarter note. But they still want to, you know, keep the consistency of that, right? And then they, or what did they do? Oh yeah, and then they did something else different here. So they're not going to beam beats 2 and 3 together. They're going to keep it, this is a group, and this is, I don't know what it is, but something like that. Does that make sense? It's confusing, and you're going to find there are some examples that are harder to read than they should be, somehow, I don't know. And maybe you'll be real pros and this stuff won't, but when it's like 8th quarter, or 8th quarter, you know, this would be 1 and 2 and. Do you see how that 2 is hidden? You can't see where beat 2 is? That's where it gets a little confusing to read. Whereas if I beam them, I'm probably throwing way too much at you, but if I beam them by just, you know, 1 beat, 2 beats, and then tied the middle one, at least you'd be able to see where that 2 fell. You see? Which I kind of think is a little easier to read, but that's not really what you'll see with the book. You're going to see this. And we'll get there, okay? I just thought I'd give you that little aside. So let us all please clap example number 2. 1 and 2 and ready, go. 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes? Cool. Number 3. How about these 3 right here, okay? 1 and 2 and ready, go.
1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2,
Good.
3, 4, 1 and 2, 3.
Beautiful. Everybody number 3. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1. Beautiful. All right, how about the middle row here? Example number 4. 1 and 2 and ready, go.
1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2,
Good.
3, 4 and 1, 2,
Yes.
3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
Excellent. Everybody number 4. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1
And 2,
3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Excellent. Oh my goodness, what are we going to give this row over here? How about some 3, 4? So Mitchell, what would 3 for me?
We need 3 beats per measure.
Yes.
And then each quarter note has 1 beat.
Yeah, you're right. The quarter note's going to get the beat, but instead of the 4 beats, now we got 3. So we got a little waltz going. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So just kind of a little different, right? Now in the case of 3, 4, do you see that? They are going to beam each quarter note together individually. You know, they're not going to do the double. They only do that with 4, 4. Oh, I erased it. Well, this. Okay? All right, this row here we go. Number 5. 1, 2, 3, 1. Ready, go.
1, 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 4.
Shall we try that again?
Yeah.
All right, see, it's a little harder to switch like that. We're used to that 4, and now it's like, no, we don't want 4. You know what's the hardest, at least for me? 2, 4. Because you totally want a beat 3 and 4. You will just keep going. It's just 2, 4 is really hard, so maybe we'll get some 2, 4. All right, let's give that one more shot here, this side of the room. 1, ready, go.
1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and
Yeah.
3,
1
and 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3.
and awesome. Excellent. Everybody number 5. 1, ready, go.
1, 2, 3,
1 and 2 and 3, 1
and 2, 3.
1 and 2 and 3 and. I don't know if in your books, but do you see how that 1 is in bold in the last measure?
Yeah.
I have no idea. This book is filled with typos. Another one is kind of at the very number 6. I think they give you a 1 and 2 and. You can say the and. You don't need to say the and, but I crossed it off, but you need to do it. So number 6, how about we do, how about just the very back row? You think you can do it on your own? This is number 6, 3, 4. Here we go. 1, ready, go.
1 and 2.
Up, up, up. So yeah, 1 and 2. Okay, here we go. 1. Here, I'll give you a better count in. 1, 2, 3, 1. Ready, go.
1 and 2.
Good.
3, 4, 2 and 3 and 1. Oh, I'm getting messed up.
That's all right. Let's try it one more time. And again, you don't have to clap. Don't clap on that quarter rest, right? It's So it's a little, this is kind of like the class of walking and chewing gum and patting your stomach. It's kind of, there's a lot going on. Let's give it one more shot. 1, ready, go.
1 and 2, 3. 1, 2 and 3. 1 and 2, 3.
Yes?
1 and 2.